not gone. Okay. Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us and talking about these questions. First of all, just give us a briefing since yesterday when we spoke with the director. What is the latest on the investigation? What is JSO doing to help solve this crime?
Well, obviously now we've got to tie the suspect that we have to the victim and her actual apparent murder. So we're working forensically now to do all of that.
Is there a lot of evidence?
So yeah, I mean, we have a whole band of evidence.
Did he confess? Can you say anything about it?
Okay.
A lot of people are raising the concern and questions about if this mother called 911 shortly after 11 o'clock. Yes, she let her guard down. If she called 911 shortly after 11 o'clock, JSO responded to the scene, I believe got there around 11:18 p.m., correct?
Right.
Why wasn't the public alerted through either the media or social media like Facebook and Twitter earlier? Why did we not hear that it was an abduction of a youth by a known sex offender until 4:42 the next morning?
Well, first you have to understand when the officers get to the scene of a case, they have to determine exactly what it is they're investigating. Once they determine that this was not just a typical missing person, but did involve potentially an abduction, then they reached out. They made the notifications to the watch commander and other. Well, the watch commander was already around today. Other officers were called to the scene to begin a search. An ears broadcast was put out about 12:15. That's the emergency alert response. All of the media outlets telling them that homicide was responding to the scene, but it did not include, and this is what I'm looking into now, but it did not include the fact that they were responding to an abduction. It just said that they were responding to this address at the Walmart, that homicide had been called out.
So at that time, when homicide was called out, JSO knew and did suspect foul play?
Yes, yes. And when they put out that first year's broadcast, we already expected foul play. Why that signal 30, the abduction information, was not included in that year's broadcast, that's what I'm looking into. But then, as they continued the investigation, the initial response was excellent. The officers did everything they could have and should have done, other than, I think, they didn't call a PIO to the scene, and they didn't make proper staff notification. It doesn't appear. We're still looking into all this. But they also left out that portion in the ears broadcast at 12:15 that there was an abduction involved in this case. Then, as they continue to work the case, at 1:45, because no media had showed up at the scene at that point, based on the original ears broadcast, they put out another ears broadcast about 1:45 to say that the sergeant in charge of the homicide investigation was going to do a stand-up and speak to the media, and still no one showed up. And so then it was later, I think, as you said, around 4:42, that they finally put out that you know, hey, look, we need you to come to the scene. This is actually an abduction that we're working, and we need your assistance. I think that should have happened back at 12:15, but I'm investigating that to find out what everybody knew, when they knew it, and how was it that first year's broadcast went out without the abduction information in it. It went out, and it went out that homicide was responding, but the officers at the scene have the responsibility, and I know, speaking to you earlier, you guys, said, well, you know, I know we didn't go at 12:15, but that's not your responsibility. We needed the media that night. We should have made sure that you were there quicker, and that's our responsibility, not yours. I don't care how many years broadcasts we put out. That should have been a phone call to say, hey, nobody showed up. We need you. out here. We got to get this information out to the public. So that's everything that I'm looking at right now.
So this was a communication issue, an error somewhere.
Somewhere. I do know that the comm center was notified to call out homicide for a possible signal 30, which is an abduction. But they just simply put out homicide is responding to this address, and they left off the last portion dealing with an abduction.
According to your procedures, I mean, do they have permission to, I know they can't give out too much public information without a lieutenant or a sergeant or somebody on the scene higher ranking, but per your procedures, would they have the right, in their opinion, to say, hey, we've got a possible abduction?
No, absolutely. Once that determination was made, and obviously it had been made by the sergeant when the ears broadcast was going out, they knew that they had a possible abduction. That should have been included in that ears broadcast.
When did you find out, Sheriff, that something terrible
I didn't find
happened?
out till 7 or 6 o'clock in the morning. So,
should you have been woken up? Should somebody have contacted you?
well, me or my staff. Now I've got a lot of staff that should have been called as well, and none were. So I'm concerned about the staff call out on this as well.
So I guess that stands
But I'm more concerned about why the media wasn't brought into this more quickly to help us begin tracking down the van. They did everything else. They had the air units, they had plenty of ground units. They were going through databases, which is how they identified him so quickly. But I can't, and that's why we're investigating. I can't answer why that wasn't included in the first year's broadcast.
Does it stand the same that the public information officer on duty was also not notified until later?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And had that taken place as it should have, then I would hope that the signal 30 portion would not have been excluded from the ears broadcast. But the ears broadcast comes out of the comm center. So
communication center,
right,
comm center.
Right.
Okay.
So what I've got to do, I've got to get a timeline for what everyone knew and did in the comm center, in patrol, and in the detective police. And so once I get all of those different timelines together, and I can compare them all, hopefully I can find out where the ball was dropped on not calling you guys more quickly.
Because in your mind, you would have ideally liked to have the media breaking in on it, putting it on the internet, putting it on social media, Facebook and Twitter and all that.
Right, and that's what the PIO would have been responsible for. The investigative portion, they did a brilliant job. I mean, just brilliant, and that'll come out later. But, take it from me, when you can identify a suspect as quickly as they did in this case, and then, and I should say, they put the bolo out like they should have immediately to patrol officers to be on the lookout for this white van with this fellow in it. But why they didn't utilize the media to help get that word out, I can't say.
Could that
That's
have made
what
a
I'm
big
trying
difference?
to figure out.
Could that have made a big difference in this case potentially?
Well, who knows? We may never know the answer to that.
Can we call it, I know you're looking into it, can we call it an internal investigation, or is that proper?
Well, not at this time. I don't know. I'm trying to, that's what I'm investigating right now, preliminarily, to find out. Do I need to turn this over to internal because somebody failed to follow proper policy and procedure? Obviously, I think so, somewhere, but I got to figure out exactly where that responsibility lies.
A lot of parents are worried. What kind of reassurances can you give them? Obviously, nothing's going to bring back little Cherish, but what kind of reassurances can you give them in the future if, God forbid, something like this were to play out again?
Vic, I think parents need to know. Look, I hear everybody talking about the offender databases that are out there, and you can go on there and see who lives in your area and all of that. Well, turns out this suspect didn't live anywhere near that area. And so I want to reinforce, and every time I talk about offender watch, and if folks go to JAXSHERIFF.org, www.jaxsheriff.org, they go to our offender watch, click on that button, put in their address, and they can see all of the predators that live in their area. Problem is, these guys travel. This guy traveled. He lived down in Mandarin somewhere, and close to Mandarin, and this is out on the north side. So you can't rest on those things. And I tell people when I talk to them about offender watch and other things, look, this is just information to help arm you and help you better take care of your children. But you've got to know who they're with. You've got to know where they're going, what they're doing. And we can't be there, you know, every minute. You've got to take that responsibility for knowing where your kids are at and who they're with. And I would caution folks, you know, and obviously it's very clear to everyone right now, but you can't trust strangers.
It's got to be parenting first. You got to talk about it with your kids. What are some of the other advice? I mean,
well, but children need to know that if they're approached, don't give out information. Look, don't allow strangers to just come up and start talking to your children if you're in the area. And I know you can't keep them right on the foot, but if you see a son or a daughter who is approached by a stranger, you need to engage that stranger and let them know, hey, he doesn't know you. Don't be talking to my child, and pull that child away, and just know where they're at.
it's really what's got to hit home.
That's
You can't reiterate it enough.
And you know, there's cases where these guys are very adept at putting people at ease, particularly children. And they have their own ways of putting them at ease and gaining their confidence, and that's the dangerous part of these guys. They don't look like Frankenstein. They're not bad people when you talk to them, and that's the tough part. Usually they're very congenial. They can sit down and talk to you, and you never know until they lure your child.
Right. I know we went off on a very helpful tangent, and that's something we're going to do tonight. Back to the investigation real quickly.
Right.
The Amber Alert came probably, I think,
About 5 hours.
5:58, something. Okay. Is that typical? I know this is FDLE, not JSO, but is that typical?
No, well, that's still JSO too.
Yeah.
But we request the Amber Alert. I don't know that is such a bad. That's a reasonable time, I think.
Okay.
For an Amber Alert when you've got to collect information on a suspect that you don't know. Sometimes they will put out an Amber Alert. There's a lot of criteria to get an Amber Alert out. They can give you a list. One of them used to be you had to have a tag number for the suspect. That we just put out a vehicle description. Now I think that's changed. But you have to meet all these criteria to get an Amber Alert out. It takes time to communicate with them, answer their questions, and then in this case, what happened was, between the time that we spoke with them initially, I'm being told, after we talked to them initially about getting the Amber Alert, we had, when they called back to confirm the story that goes out on the Amber Alert, we had additional information that we wanted to put out, because by then I think they had determined what the tag number was, who he was, that sort of thing. They had a photograph, I think, of him by that time, and they wanted to get all of that out in that Amber Alert. So they give them that information, and they've got to go back, put that in the story, change the story. So I'm not as concerned about the Amber Alert time as I am the media time. his media time was the media time was at the initial point of the investigation. That could have been helpful. Could have been possible. Who knows? You know. But the point is, and this may be something that we need to talk to our officers about. An ears alert is not our request for the media. We're just putting information out.
Sure.
If we need the media as an asset for an investigation, to, as you said, to break in to viewing and tell people what's going on out there, that's our responsibility. That's not yours. And so the fact that y'all didn't respond to the 12-15 years, that doesn't matter to me. That's not your responsibility. That's our responsibility if we're going to use you as a resource and an asset to help us solve the case.
So can parents be reassured that you're going to look at this thoroughly, that you're going to make sure that a mistake like this never happens again here in Jacksonville?
Well, I hope we never have another abduction of a child in Jacksonville. And I hope parents know from this circumstance that, you know, don't allow your children to walk off with strangers.
Anything else, guys? We need to cover? Around what time did detectives find out that the man whom they were looking for with Cherish, because I'm sure they knew Cherish early on from talking to Rain, the mom.
Right.
Okay.
What time did they find out the man they were looking for was Donald Smith?
I can't give you a time, but I know in the order of the investigation was between the time that we asked for the first Amber Alert and they called back to the story. So whatever time of the morning that was, 3 o'clock, and that's why I say they figured out who he was incredibly quick.
Yeah. Based on a surveillance photo.
They did that very quickly.
They
Yeah,
just went through
and
all the
that was some
photos
good
in the
work,
database.
and that was some good work by an officer, a patrolman, I believe, who went through some databases looking for offenders, just on the off chance that might be who it is, and found a photograph that kind of fit the description, and then we did a photo spread, and he was picked out.
We were amazed too. I mean,
Yeah, they did that very
very
quickly.
fast.
And-
They had this and the van and the tag number and.
Right, and we're very fortunate that at some point, the information was put out there about the van. And you know, we got a call from a citizen, later in the morning, I think around 8 o'clock, that they had seen this van or a van behind the church. And that's what led to the recovery.
And you got that call because they were watching one of the news agencies? Something like
Well,
that?
I don't know if it was just, hey, there's a suspicious vehicle over here, or, hey, I saw this on television and, you know, there's a suspicious vehicle over here that looks like that. I'm not sure what the circumstances of, what prompted their call. You know, I'm sure the investigators will tell you that, but I can't.
So that's what sparked the search, which ultimately led to the terrible discovery.
Of course, in the meantime, because of the bolo that the officers had put out when they first arrived, the be on the lookout for, and the vehicle description, the officer that was up on I-95 working a crash sees a van drive by and he goes, holy cow, I think that's the van they're looking for. So he breaks off of that and chases down the van.
We heard from Shannon Hartley about an incredible amount of resources, even calling some mutual aid in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how many officers, you know, what all responded?
I can't give you an exact number right now. I know I know several notifications were made. You know, Nassau County, a lot of or Becker County. I think they put bolos out to other surrounding counties as well. You know, to ask them to put the bolo out there for the vehicle. I can't give you all that. I know there were several officers involved. I just don't know how many.
But I mean, K-9 helicopter
Oh yeah.
patrol units.
Right.
detectives.
Right.
So that
Oh, it
part,
was-
that part,
that
I believe, went flawlessly.
Investigatively, they did a fantastic job. What I'm concerned about is not having utilized the media as a resource the way we should have and could have. And that all lands on why wasn't the PIO notified?
PIO stands for Public Information.
The public information, right?
And the on-duty PIO was not akin to this information until much later in the morning,
Right,
right before us, the media found
right. And that's the problem. So,
it. Okay. If you want to we'll just get a couple more. There's no suspensions or anything like that yet, right?
no.
I just want to make
I don't
sure.
know what happened yet.
Right, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that I'm not missing anything. I didn't miss any big questions or.
No, I think that
And I have to
that
say,
pretty much covers it.
yeah.
You know, look, and tell your folks, your management people, look, somebody not going out there, I don't put any of that on you guys. That ain't your responsibility. We needed the media. That's our job.
But we're questioning ourselves too, because obviously everybody's hurt by this.
Yeah.
So, me personally, as being on the air, I was anchoring as Shannon went on the air. So, we're all hurt by it. So, we're going over the way that we do things too. Because we have an on-call photographer and reporter 24/7. We didn't call her.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
we just thought,